Buddhāvataṃsaka Sutra. Book 39. Entry into the Realm of Reality. Video 2. From the nadir, beyond as many oceans of worlds as atoms in untold Buddha lands, from the land of the Buddha King of the banner of the torch of unobstructed knowledge, in the world radiance of the halos of all Buddhas, a great enlightening being named Valiant One with knowledge to dissolve all barriers, together with a company of as many enlightening beings as atoms in untold oceans of worlds, given leave by that Buddha and having disappeared from that assembly, came to this world endurance, emitting from every pore the sounds of utterances of the ocean of all incantations in the world, the sounds of the clouds of the oceans of instruction of the enlightening beings of past, present, and future, sounds of the ocean of vows, undertakings, and methods of all enlightening beings, sounds of the ocean of enlightening beings, means of pervading all lands with their spheres of action, sounds of the clouds of the oceans of all enlightening beings, means of purification and fulfillment of the ways of transcendence, sounds of the ocean of means of the accomplishments and spiritual effects of all enlightening beings, oceans of expressions of the spiritual transformations by means of which all Buddhas go to the summit of enlightenment, disperse the opposition of demons, and realize enlightenment. Clouds of sounds of the ocean of words used by all Buddhas in turning the wheel of the teaching, expressions of the expedient means of teaching and training used to guide all people at the appropriate times, sounds of the ocean of means of teaching using methods appropriate to the aspiration, excellence of roots of goodness, and time, in order to lead to all knowledge. Emanating these sounds, the great enlightening being and company came to the Buddha and offered them in respect, then withdrew to the nadir, magically produced towers of various mines of all kinds of jewels from the matrix of light of the palaces of all Buddhas, as well as lion thrones in spaces held by lotuses inset with all jewels, upon which they sat, having put on crests of jewel emblems reflecting images of all sights of enlightenment, and covered their bodies with nets of the finest jewels illumining all lands. From the zenith, beyond as many oceans of worlds as atoms in untold Buddha lands, from the land of the Buddha voice revealing the sphere of universal knowledge, in the world description of the inexhaustible lineage of Buddhas, a great enlightening being named revealing the base of cosmic aspiration, together with a company of as many enlightening beings as atoms in untold oceans of worlds, given leave by that Buddha and having disappeared from that assembly, came to this world endurance, from every physical feature, every pore, every part of the body, every limb and joint, every utterance, every article of clothing and adornment, showing images of the oceans of past efforts of all Buddhas past, present, and future connected with transcendent giving which took place in all lands of the 10 directions, as well as images of the receivers and the gifts, reflected in every mark and embellishment, every pore, every part of the body, every limb and joint, every utterance, every article of clothing and adornment of the company of enlightening beings, as well as the Buddhāvataṃsaka, showing reflections of the oceans of their past efforts involved in transcendent morality, in transcendent tolerance, even involving showing amputation of limbs, in the transcendent energy of all enlightening beings, surging boldly forward, in the seeking and attainment of the ocean of meditations of all Buddhas, in the seeking of the ultimate truth to which the wheel of teaching of all Buddhas leads, in the manifestation of the embodiment of great determination which relinquishes all there is, in the joy of the vision of all Buddhas, the path of all enlightening beings, and pleasing all beings, in the arrangements of purification of means of accomplishment of the ocean of vows of all enlightening beings, in the purification of the strength of the attainment of transcendent power of all enlightening beings, and showing images of the oceans of past efforts involved in the sphere of knowledge of all enlightening beings, all these reflected images bursting into plain view by clouds of all kinds of miraculous displays throughout the cosmos. The great enlightening being and company offered these to the Buddha, then went to the zenith, magically produced towers of various arrays of diamonds as well as lion thrones of the universally good enlightening being inside emerald lotuses, and sat thereon, having covered their bodies with nets of fiery jewels and put on crowns of jewels with crests of trailing strings of diamonds vibrating with the names of the Buddhas of past, present, and future. All those enlightening beings, with their retinues, were born of the practices and vows of the universally good enlightening being. They had the pure eye of knowledge to see all Buddhas face to face. They were endowed with the acute ears to hear the ocean of teachings of all Buddhas. They had reached the ultimate transcendent attainment of the masteries of all enlightening beings. From moment to moment they issued manifestations of going to all Buddhas. They were in the range of pervading all worlds with one body. They had luminous bodies appearing in the circles of the congregations of all Buddhas. They were in the realm of showing the reflections of all worlds and one world contained in each other in a single atom. They had the power to guide and develop all people with appropriate timing. They were in the realm of emitting clouds of teachings of all Buddhas from every pore. They each had attained the knowledge that all realms of beings are like illusions. They had realized that all Buddhas are like reflections. They knew that all existence, states of beings, and births are like dreams. They had pure knowledge that all developments of actions are like images in a mirror. They were intensely aware that all becoming is like a mirage. They perceived that all worlds are like emanations. They had attained the illumination of the knowledges of the 10 powers of Buddhas. They were fearless and mighty, able to roar the lion's roar. They had entered the inexhaustible ocean of analytic knowledge. They had attained knowledge of expressions of principles of the ocean of instruments of thought of all people. They coursed in the knowledge of the unobstructed space of the reality realm. They had attained unimpeded knowledge of all things. They had purified the spheres of supreme knowledges of all enlightening beings. They had the rigor to root out all bands of demons. They stood firm in the power of knowledge of past, present, and future. They had attained unobstructed omniscience. They coursed in the space of independence. They were powerful in the space of the effortless stage of omniscience. They coursed in knowledge of the ungraspability of all existence. They had exposed the knowledge of the ocean of principles of all realms of reality. They had entered the door of non-discriminatory knowledge of all worlds. They demonstrated the mutual interpenetration of all worlds. They manifested incarnation in all realms of being. They knew the various forms of all worlds, subtle and gross, broad and narrow. They had attained knowledge of the interpenetration of minute objects and immense lands. They could reach all Buddhas in a single moment of thought. They had the body of knowledge of all Buddhas. They had attained unconfused knowledge of all regions. They could pervade the ocean of all locations in a single moment of thought by mystic metamorphosis. The whole Jeta grove became filled with enlightening beings of such immeasurable attainments, by the power of the Buddhas. The great disciples, however, Shariputra, Madhyayana, Makashyapa, Revata, Subhuti, Aniruddha, Nandika, Kalfina, Katyayana, Pranamatrayaniputra, and so did not see the transfiguration of the Buddha in the Jeta grove, the adornments of the Buddha, the majesty of the Buddha, the freedom of the Buddha, the magic of the Buddha, the mastery of the Buddha, the miracle performed by the Buddha, the light of the Buddha, the power of the Buddha, or the Buddha's purification of the land. Nor did they see the inconceivable sphere of the enlightening beings, the descent of the enlightening beings, the gathering of the enlightening beings, the descent of the enlightening beings, the approach of the enlightening beings, the miracle of the enlightening beings, the magic of the enlightening beings, the circles of the enlightening beings, the locations of the enlightening beings, the arrayed lion thrones of the enlightening beings, the mansions of the enlightening beings, the deportment of the enlightening beings, the enlightening beings' mastery of concentration, the enlightening beings' observation, the enlightening beings' emergence, the enlightening beings' vigor, the enlightening beings' offerings to the Buddha, the enlightening beings' bequest of enlightenment, the enlightening beings' development, the enlightening being's strength, the enlightening being's clarification of the reality body, the enlightening being's fulfillment of the body of knowledge, the enlightening being's manifestation of the body of vows, the enlightening being's perfection of the physical body, the enlightening being's purification of excellence of attributes, the enlightening being's array of spheres of light of eternal power, the enlightening being's radiation of networks of light beams, the enlightening being's emission of clouds of emanations, the enlightening being's pervasion of the network of all regions, or the transfiguration of the sphere of actions of enlightening beings. Why didn't the disciples see any of this? Because of lack of corresponding roots of goodness. For they had not accumulated the roots of goodness conducive to vision of the transfiguration of all Buddhas, and they had not had the purifications of the arrays of qualities of all Buddha lands in the 10 directions described to them, and they had not had the various wonders of all Buddhas described to them by the Buddhas, and they had not established beings in supreme perfect enlightenment, while they were involved in the world. And they had not instilled in others' minds the determination for enlightenment, and they were not capable of perpetuating the lineage of Buddhas, and they were not engaged in the salvation of all beings, and they had not exhorted enlightening beings to practice transcendent ways, and while they were involved in the world they had not focused their minds on the stage of knowledge superior to all worldlings. And they had not developed the foundations of goodness conducive to omniscience, and they had not perfected the transmundane roots of goodness of Buddhas, and they had not realized the miraculous super-knowledge to purify all Buddha lands, and they did not know the source of the great vow of enlightening beings, which is the good root of concentration on unique world. Transcending enlightenment that represents the range of vision of enlightening beings, and they were not born of the magical essence emanating from the power of the enlightened, and because hearers and individual illuminates do not share in the knowledge of enlightening beings' control over holding various perceptions as in dreams, the growth of the current of joy of enlightening beings, and the manifestations of the range of the eye of knowledge of the universally good enlightening being. Because of that, those great disciples, who were the best of the best, did not see the miracle of the Buddha, did not hear it, know it, realize it, penetrate it, did not fix their minds on it, did not notice it, did not focus their attention on it, did not observe it, did not examine it, did not reflect on it, did not contemplate it. Why? Because that is the sphere of Buddhas, not the sphere of disciples. Therefore, even though the disciples were in the very same Jeta grove, they did not see those miracles of the Buddha. For indeed they did not have the corresponding roots of goodness. They did not have that purity of the eye of knowledge, whereby they could have seen the miracles of Buddha. They did not know the concentration whose minute point of focus would have given them access to those vast magical manifestations. They did not know that liberation, or that spiritual capacity, or that might, or that power, or that mastery, or that state, or that perception, or that power of vision, whereby they might recognize or see or penetrate or approach, or discover or head for or observe or experience, or reveal to others or explain or show or describe or make visible, or arrive at or produce or lead beings into the cultivation and realization of the realities of the miracles of Buddha. That knowledge did not belong to them. Why? Because they were emancipated by the vehicle of hearers. They had realized the path of hearers. They had fulfilled the sphere of practices of hearers. They were fixed in the fruit of hearers. They rested on the knowledge of the light of truth. They were fixed at the limit of reality. They had gone to the state of eternal peace. They had no thought of great compassion and had no pity for the beings of the world. They had accomplished what they had to do for themselves. They had gathered in the Jeta Grove and were sitting there, in front of, behind, and to the left and right of the Buddha, in his presence. Yet they did not see the miracles of the Buddha in the Jeta Grove. Why? It is not possible for those who have not developed omniscient knowledge, have not accomplished omniscient knowledge, have not set out for omniscient knowledge, have not resolved on omniscient knowledge, have not undertaken omniscient knowledge, have not penetrated omniscient knowledge, have not purified omniscient knowledge, to understand or become aware of or see or discover the miraculous manifestation of the concentration of the Buddha. Why? Because that is discernible only to the range of the vision of developed enlightening beings, not to the range of the vision of hearers. That is why the great disciples, the great hearers, though in the Jeta Grove, did not see the transfiguration of the Buddha, the magical appearances of the Buddha, the purifications of the Buddha land, the gathering of the enlightening beings. The situation was like that of hundreds of thousands of ghosts gathered on the bank of the great river Ganges, hungry and thirsty, naked, without shelter, emaciated, dehydrated by the wind and heat, attacked by flocks of crows, terrorized by wolves and jackals. They do not see the Ganges River, or they may see it as dry, without water, or full of ashes, because they are shrouded by actions that blind them. In the same way the old great disciples there in the Jeta Grove did not see or penetrate the transfigurations of the Buddha, because they rejected omniscience and their eyes were veiled by ignorance. It was like the case of a man who has dozed off in the daytime in the midst of a large group of people and while asleep sees a celestial city with beautiful mansions appearing there in his dream, and sees the whole summit of the polar mountain, with groves and gardens, with innumerable nymphs all around, innumerable godlings living there, and various celestial flowers scattered about, and sees wish-fulfilling trees providing various celestial garments, jewel ornaments, and flower garlands, and sees musical trees producing all kinds of sweet celestial sounds, and many kinds of forms of pleasure and diversion, and hears the sweet sounds of the music and singing of the heavenly nymphs, and perceives himself as being there, seeing the adornment of the celestial arrays all over the place. The group of people who are there in the same place do not see this, are not aware of it, do not observe it, because it is the vision of the man in his dream, not the vision of the group of people in the same place. In the same way, the enlightening beings and the world rulers on the verge of enlightenment, by virtue of the tremendous power of the Buddha, by the attainment of their own roots of goodness, by their own undertaking of the vow for omniscience, by development of the qualities of all Buddhas, by stabilization in the magnificent path of enlightening beings, by accomplishment of the outgrowths of the teachings of all aspects of omniscient knowledge, by fulfillment and purification of the higher aspirations of the acts of the universally good enlightening being, by entering the spheres of knowledge of all the stages of enlightening beings, by mastery of all the states of concentration of enlightening beings, and by unhindered contemplation of all the spheres of knowledge of enlightening beings, saw the inconceivable power and mastery of the Buddha, understood and comprehended, whereas the great disciples, the best of the best, did not see or understand, because they did not have the eye of enlightening beings. On the snowy king of mountains are many medicinal herbs, which someone who is expert in secret lore and medicine, knowing all the principles of herbal medicine, may go and pick, while herders and hunters on the same mountain, ignorant of herbal medicine, do not know the essence, energy, results, efficacy, or method of application of the herbs. In the same way, those enlightening beings who had entered the sphere of knowledge of Buddhas and produced the transformed perceptions of enlightening beings were aware of the transfigured perceptions of the concentration of Buddha, while the great disciples, even though they were there in the same Jeta grove, being satisfied with their own task and having no desire to work for others, being indifferent, dwelt in the feeling of bliss, because they were in a condition of bliss in their present state, and so were not aware of the perceptions of the concentration and miraculous transfiguration of Buddha. This earth is abundantly endowed with mines of jewels of all kinds, with hundreds of thousands of deposits, filled with endless supplies of various jewels. Someone who has acquired knowledge of precious substances, sees where the deposits are, has thoroughly studied the appropriate science and technology, and is supported by immense virtue and strength, then can take jewels and enjoy himself as he wishes, properly honor his parents, support his wife and children, and also distribute them evenly to the old, the poor, the destitute, the unfortunate, those without food and clothing. On the other hand, those who do not know about the deposits of jewels, who have not done good works, and have not clarified the eye of knowledge of the precious, do not discover the jewel mines in spite of the fact that they are walking on them. They do not take the jewels and do not do what can be done with jewels. Similarly, the enlightening beings in the Jeta grove who had clarified the eye of knowledge of the inconceivable sphere of Buddha and who had entered the sphere of the inconceivable knowledge of Buddha saw the miraculous transfigurations of Buddha, entered the oceans of principles of the Buddha teachings, attained oceans of concentrations, engaged in the service of the Buddhas, took to embracing all truths, took all beings into their care with the four means of integration. The great disciples, however, did not see or notice the transfigurations of the Buddha or the great assembly of the enlightening beings. It was, again, as if a man came to a land of jewels with his eyes blindfolded by a rag. He might walk around, stand, sit, and lie there, but he would not see the masses of jewels, he would not see the jewel trees, jewel clothes, jewel fragrances, or any of the other jewels. Furthermore, he would not know the use, value, or enjoyment of those jewels. He would not take the jewels and would not know what to do with the jewels. Someone whose eyes were uncovered, however, would see and distinguish them all. In the same way, those enlightening beings, having come to the land of jewels of truth, where the unsurpassed jewel of the enlightened, adornment of all worlds, was right before them, standing in the Jeta Grove, saw the Buddha displaying inconceivable miraculous transfigurations. The great disciples, however, were standing at the Buddha's feet and gazing at the Buddha, but they did not see the miraculous occurrence emanating from the sphere of the Buddha's concentration, and did not see the great treasury of jewels which was the great assembly of enlightening beings. Why? They were inimical to omniscience, their eyes covered with the rag of ignorance, and they had not clarified the eye of unobstructed knowledge of enlightening beings, and they did not realize that all things interpenetrate, which is how they could have seen the miracle produced by the inconceivable power of the Buddha's concentration. Again, it is as if there is an eye purifier called possessed of undefiled brilliance, which is incompatible with any darkness or obscurity. Suppose someone obtained it and with that eye clarifier possessed of undefiled brilliance went in the dark of night among a huge crowd of people in various postures unable to see in the darkness, and walked around, stood there, sat down, and so on. Those people would not see this person or distinguish what he was doing. On the other hand, this person would see the crowd of people, their various postures, positions, locations, appearances, and dress. In the same way, the Buddha, together with his company of enlightening beings, having the pure unobstructed eye of knowledge, discerns and sees all beings. Buddha shows the miracle emanated from the great concentration of Buddha, but the great disciples did not see the miracle emanated from the concentration of great knowledge of Buddha, or the great company of the assembly of enlightening beings. Also, it is as if a monk in the midst of a large group of people attained the concentration of total absorption in earth or water or fire or wind, or total absorption in blue, yellow, red, or white, or total absorption in heaven, or in the bodies of various beings, or in all sounds, or in all objects. That group of people would not see the body of water, would not see the realm of fire, would not see the various bodies or totality of objects in which the monk's mind was absorbed, except for those who had themselves attained those states of concentration. In the same way, the great disciples did not see the Buddha's revelation of the inconceivable wonder of the sphere of the concentration of Buddha, while the enlightening beings who had attained the path of the Buddha entered into the sphere of the Buddha. Again, it is as if there were an ointment, which simply by being applied to one's eyes makes one invisible to others, while one is able to see others. In the same way Buddha, beyond the world, beyond the spheres of all beings, having entered the sphere of omniscience, can be discerned by the eye of knowledge of enlightening beings, and sees all beings in the world. But the great disciples could not see those miracles of the Buddha. It is also like the case of the celestial spirit born together with a person and always associated with the person. The spirit sees the person, but the person does not see the spirit. In the same way, the Buddha, in the sphere of omniscience, manifested great miraculous transfigurations of Buddha in the midst of the great assembly of enlightening beings, but the great disciples did not see, did not notice, the miracle of the transfiguration of the Buddha or the magical manifestation of the circle of enlightening beings. Again, It is like the case of a monk who has attained perfect control of mind and has reached extinction of perception and sensation. He neither perceives nor cognizes and does nothing with his 6 sense organs, but still is not totally extinct. All the ordinary events of the world are going on there where he is, but he does not perceive or cognize them, because of the overmastery of the power of his concentration. In the same way, the great disciples were in the Jeta Grove and had the 6 sense faculties, but they did not see, penetrate, perceive, or discern the miracle of the power emanated from the concentration of the Buddha, nor did they gain access to, see, or cognize the great gathering of the enlightening beings, the miracle of the enlightening beings, the transfiguration of the enlightening beings. Why? The sphere of Buddha is indeed profound, vast, immeasurable, difficult to see, difficult to realize, difficult to plunge into, completely beyond all worldlings. For all disciples and individual illuminates, the sphere of Buddha is unthinkable and ungraspable. Therefore, the great disciples, even though they were there in the Jeta Grove at the feet of the Buddha, did not see the transfigurations of the Buddha, and they did not see or apprehend the great gathering of enlightening beings or their concentration of the arrays of qualities of enlightening beings or their concentration of the arrays of qualities of inconceivable, innumerable purified worlds in the Jeta Grove, because they did not have the capacity to do so. Continue to video 3.